After losing her job, Turid, a single mother, moves with her 2 children to her hometown with the aim of working at GOD Industries. When he sees an elderly man in the middle of the street struggling to control his electric wheelchair, Magna goes out to help him and meets Venka, a mysterious woman who uses her abilities to unleash the young man's powers. When he returns to his vehicle, Magna realizes that something is different, as he is unable to control his own strength. The next day, the 2 brothers are introduced to their new class, and while Loritz sits next to Gree, Magna goes to the back of the classroom to sit with Isolde, Eric's daughter. According to the history teacher, Ragnarok, known as the final battle between gods and giants, took place in that city. Due to the strong influence of the Norse gods on its culture, Edda was the last city in Norway to become Christian and renounce its ancient faith. During recess, Magna approaches Isolde, and the girl is surprised to realize that he is trying to befriend her, since she is not very popular at school. According to the young woman, the most popular students are Fjord and Saxa, children of Ran, who, in addition to being the principal, also serves as an English teacher. At the end of class, Isolde discovers that someone has bent the wheel of her bicycle and reveals that this is not the first time this has happened. When he notices the young woman's frustration, Magna decides to try to help her and uses his strength to fix the wheel. The next day, while trying to read what his teacher wrote on the blackboard, Magna realizes that he no longer needs to wear his glasses, and on his way home, he stops to fill up the car with his mother. At that moment, the young man meets Vidar, the principal's husband, and his dog Trim, who becomes extremely agitated when he sees Magna. Apparently, Turid and Vidar are childhood friends, and because of this, the woman was hired to work in the accounting department of his company. When he gets home, the businessman searches the internet to remember what happened to Asbjorn, Magna's father, who was an employee at his factory. When the young man was only 6 years old, his father perished in a work accident. Suspecting that Magna may pose a threat to his family, Vidar orders his children to keep an eye on him and report any suspicious behavior. The next day, after class, Isolde invites Magna to dinner at her house, and he is very happy, as this is the first time the young man has experienced what it is like to be friends with someone. During dinner, she invites him to go up the mountains on Saturday and then paraglide down. The girl is an environmental activist and has a YouTube channel where she shares her theories about who is behind the pollution in her city and the melting of the glaciers. Although he does not agree with his daughter's activism, Eric does not scold her, as he knows that this will only serve to make her even more committed. On Saturday morning, as agreed, Magna accompanies his friend on a climb, and during the ascent, Isolde tells him that she intends to leave that city as soon as she graduates from high school. Her goal is to go to another country on an exchange program, but she promises to come back to visit her friend whenever she can. Upon reaching the bridge, the pair sees a warning sign preventing visitors from climbing the mountain, but Isolde decides to ignore the sign and continues on. At that moment, Magna receives a message from his brother and discovers that something has happened to his mother. Worried, he decides to return home, and Isolde continues alone to the mountains. At that moment, Vidar parks his car near the site and removes his clothes to hunt. Seeing some prey on the other side of the river, the man activates his powers and captures the reindeer. After eliminating the animal, Vidar removes its heart with his bare hands and runs to the edge of a cliff to devour it. While collecting water samples for analysis, Isolde spots a cave and decides to go there to investigate. After a few minutes of walking, the young woman finds a door and discovers that the place belongs to GOD Industries. At that moment, Isolde hears a frightening roar and decides to investigate to find out what kind of animal is making that noise. When he arrives home, Magna discovers that his mother is completely fine and becomes furious with his brother. Immediately, the young man runs back to the mountains to try to catch up with his friend and sees the girl paragliding down, but Isolde ends up losing control and is electrocuted when she hits the high-voltage wires. Terrified, Magna rushes to help his friend, but soon realizes that it is too late. At that moment, Vidar appears and realizes that the girl's heart has stopped beating, so he tries to stimulate her heartbeat. He then calls an ambulance while Magna clings to the lifeless body of his only friend. That night, Edda is hit by a severe storm, and Magna throws his late father's hammer away. During the young man's fit of rage, electrical currents spread across the sky and all the lights in the city go out. The next day, when he arrives at school, Magna sees some flowers that have been left on Isolde's desk, and all the students are surprised when they see the history teacher arriving for class. After losing his daughter, Eric reveals that he can't stand being at home, so he decided to go to work before he ended up going crazy. That afternoon, a group of police officers go to the school to report what happened to Isolde, and Magna discovers that the girl's cell phone is missing. At that moment, the young man begins to suspect that his friend did not lose her life in an accident, and begins to suspect that Vidar may be involved. The next morning, the businessman tells his employee that someone broke his windshield, and when she sees the photo of the destroyed glass, Turid immediately recognizes that hammer. When she gets home, the woman confronts Magna and claims that Loritz was at home when Vidar's car was vandalized. However, Magna claims to have nothing to do with it, and later begins to wonder if the hammer he threw may have accidentally hit Vidar's windshield. After buying another hammer, the young man decides to make another throw and measures the distance traveled by the object. When he finds the hammer 541 meters from the throwing point, he realizes that something is wrong, as the world record is 86 meters. When she gets home, Rand tells her husband about the commotion caused at school because of Isolde, and then Vidar reveals that he was the one who eliminated her, because the girl invaded the glaciers and found the tunnel they were hiding. Although frustrated by this news, Rand decides to support her husband and reveals that the police have already closed the case, so he should not say anything to Saxa or Fjord. The following night, while his classmates are having fun at a party, Magna goes to Eric's house to question what the police said about Isolde's case. Although devastated by the loss of his daughter, the professor struggles to accept that it was just an accident and advises Magna to leave the investigation to the authorities. Upon hearing this, the young man's anger resurfaces and he pushes Eric's car in an attempt to vent his rage. At that moment, while returning from the party with Oscar and Loritz, Fjord decides to take a break at Isolde's memorial and relieve himself to extinguish the candles that were left there. Seeing this, Oscar decides to take a photo to post on social media, and Fjord hits him, ordering him to delete the photo. However, Rand managed to print the photo before it was deleted, and when she gets home, she shows the image to her husband. Hours later, when Fjord shows up, Vidar decides to confront his son and attacks the young man. Although he considers himself superior to humans, he claims that it is his family's responsibility to respect the residents of that city. On this day, Gree, one of Sax's best friends, is staying at the house, and when she leaves her room to go to the bathroom, she sees Fjord being attacked. Paralyzed with fear, the young woman simply returns to her room and pretends that nothing happened. The next morning, the townspeople attend Isolde's funeral, and when Magna returns home, he realizes that his residence has been broken into. For some reason, someone has ransacked the place, as if looking for something specific. When he discovers that his headphones are missing, Loritz decides to go after the only resident who was not at Isolde's funeral, and Nissi confesses to the crime. The homeless man reveals that he only entered the house because he found the door open, and claims that the residence was already ransacked when he took the headphones. According to Nissi, before entering the house, he saw Vidar's car parked nearby, and during a conversation with the school psychologist, Magna tells him about his suspicions. The young man is frustrated because the police have done nothing to find out who was responsible for the break-in, and he feels he needs to take justice into his own hands. When he sees Magna leaving the office, Rand decides to probe to try to find out what he talked about with Sindra, and discovers that Vidar is on the young man's radar. When she gets home, his wife tells him what she has discovered about the homeless man and says that if Nissi decides to spill the beans to the police, they could be in trouble. So, the businessman decides to eliminate the homeless man to cover up any evidence connecting him to the case, and when he is returning to his car, he sees Magna being hit by a car. The young man was talking to Eric about Isolde's clothes that were left at the morgue when a snowplow throws him away. Upon seeing this scene, Vidar quickly returns home and shares the good news with his family, as he no longer has to worry about anyone investigating Isolde's case. However, contrary to all expectations, Magna manages to escape the accident completely unharmed, without a single fracture, leaving the doctors stunned. That night, while trying to understand why his body has suddenly become so strong, the young man investigates the clothes Isolde was wearing at the time of the accident and smells a familiar scent. The next morning, when she arrives at school and sees Magna, Saxa is shocked, and after class, she informs her father about what happened. When he finds out that Magna survived, Vidar begins to wonder if that young man has some kind of ability, as no normal human being could walk away unscathed from a hit and run like that. In an attempt to find out what is wrong with him, Rand orders his children to invite Magna and Loritz to dinner at their house, and after the meal, they start drinking. Vidar's strategy is to get Magna drunk so he can interrogate him later, but even after several drinks, the young man remains sober. When he realizes that this drink alone will not be enough to intoxicate the young man, Vidar decides to share with him a drink from ancient times. According to him, this mead was what the Vikings, giants, and gods drank, and few people can handle more than a sip. When he sees Magna drinking the entire contents of his glass, Vidar is impressed and surprised by the young man's behavior immediately afterward. After drinking the mead, Magna begins to act strangely, as if something primitive has been ignited within him. When he sees him split a wooden target with a single throw, Ran is convinced that he is no ordinary human and challenges him to an arm wrestling match. Confident, Magna accepts the challenge and is surprised to discover that his principal is as strong as he is. While trying to figure out who this woman is, Magna sees Ran's true face. At that moment, he gets distracted and ends up losing the duel. Frightened, the young teenager runs to the bathroom and washes his face. Then, when he decides to look in the mirror, he comes face to face with his ancestral version. When Magna returns home, Vidar gathers his family for a war council and claims he hasn't seen anyone like him in the last 1,000 years. Fearing that the ancient gods have returned, the businessman decides to take action and tries to convince his children to support him in that battle. However, Fjord believes that Magna may be a giant, just like them, and suggests a thorough investigation before starting a war. The next morning, upon waking up, Magna decides to take a walk in the forest and begins practicing some punches. After hitting the trunk of a tree a few times, the young man manages to knock it down, and then returns home to have his breakfast. Before going to school, Magna decides to research Mead and ends up finding some drawings depicting the great battle between gods and giants. At that moment, the young man comes across an image of a woman using her powers to awaken Thor's powers and begins to wonder if that is what Venka did to him. Curious to discover the origin of his powers, Magna decides to go to the supermarket to confront the elderly woman, and Venka claims that those powers have always been within him. All she did was open his eyes. Now that he has awakened his abilities, the young man must decide whether to use his powers to free humanity from the influence of the giants or to deny his own destiny. That day, the teacher introduces a new student to the class, and Ayman takes the place that once belonged to Isolde. At the end of class, Magna invites Eric to his house and tells him that he asked the biology teacher for help analyzing the blood samples he collected from his late friend's coat. The results indicate the presence of animal blood on the fabric, but instead of questioning the police about it, Eric decides to just forget about the case, knowing that nothing he does will bring his daughter back. That weekend, the teacher takes his class on a field trip and everyone needs to gather some equipment to climb the mountain. During the climb, Magna spots the body of a reindeer a few meters away and decides to approach it to investigate. At that moment, the young man realizes that the animal's blood has the same smell he smelled on Isolde's coat, and wonders why his friend got stained with reindeer blood. When he arrives at the camp, Magna runs into Vidar and decides to help him cook lunch. While preparing the meal, the businessman asks if the young man remembers the ancient earth, and they both begin to talk in the language of the gods about the last great battle. After confirming his theory that Magna is a threat, Vidar sends his dog after him. Realizing he is being followed, the young man begins to look around and sees Trim running towards him. Shortly after striking the dog, Magna is bitten on the arm, and the pain causes him to act on his most primitive instinct, destroying the animal's jaw with his bare hands. Meanwhile, Eric walks along the trail he used to take with his daughter when she was a child and finds Isolde's cell phone hidden among some rocks. Hours later, Vidar finds his dog lifeless on top of a rock, and Fjord takes advantage of his empty house to spend the night with Gree. However, during the night, the girl gets up and decides to snoop around Vidar's office. While doing so, she finds some old photos of that family and realizes that they have been alive for decades. When he finds the girl snooping around, Fjord scolds her and asks Gree never to enter that room again. When he gets home, Magna decides to tell his mother what happened and reveals that he eliminated Vidar's dog. At that moment, the young man realizes that the wound on his arm has already healed and he cannot prove the attack. The next day, the police show up at his door for Magna to explain what happened, and the police officer investigating Isolde's case says that he may be sent to juvenile detention. However, at the request of Principal Ran, the police decide to give Magna another chance, confiscating his cell phone so he cannot access social media. After class, Eric approaches him and tells him that he found Isolde's cell phone in the glacier, but it is not working. Near the device, he also found a tube with a water sample that the girl had collected, so Magna asks if he can keep it. During the break, the young man sees Saxa asking the teacher for help during physical education class, and asks her why she is pretending not to know how to throw the javelin. At that moment, the young woman shows her true strength and throws Magna against the wall. She then throws the javelin at him and shows her threatening side. After being confronted by the girl, Magna goes to teacher Flagstad and gives her the water sample collected by Isolde so she can analyze it. That afternoon, Saxa finds one of Gree's earrings in her father's office and decides to confront her brother. Upon discovering that Fjord is in love with the girl, Saxa attacks him and starts a fight while trying to remind him that he must stay away from humans. However, the next day, when he sees Gree at school, Fior is unable to end the relationship and arranges to meet her that night. When she discovers that Magna intends to continue investigating Vidar and his family, Turid decides to contact the principal, and Ran organizes a meeting with Eric and Sindra to try to force the young man to stop his investigations. At that moment, Magna realizes that his attempts to expose the truth will always be silenced, and decides to give up the fight, as he believes he will not be able to win that war alone. Later, Teacher Flagstad goes after him and reveals that she has found traces of cadmium, lead, and mercury in the water sample. However, Magna knows that he will not be able to prove that Judal Industries is behind the contamination, and decides to go after Venka. During a brief conversation, the young man says he cannot help save the town and advises the elderly woman to choose someone else for the job. That night, Eric decides to visit Magna and reveals that Isolde's cell phone started working again after drying out for a few hours. However, he needs the young man's help to figure out the password. In the late afternoon, as agreed, Gree meets with Fior and decides to end the relationship they were beginning to build. The girl's father is a former employee of Judal Industries, and lost his job after falling ill due to the chemicals handled by that company. Therefore, Gree does not want to have anything to do with any member of that family, including Fior, the young man she is in love with. That night, when he finally manages to figure out his friend's cell phone password, Magna accesses the photo gallery and finds several images that Isolde recorded before she was eliminated. After discovering the existence of a tunnel in the glaciers, Magna decides to go there to investigate on his own, and destroys the padlock to get through the door, as he wants to find out as soon as possible what is hidden on the other side. When he turns on the lights in the warehouse, Magna comes across hundreds of barrels containing chemical waste that is contaminating the glacier and spreading heavy metals throughout the water that supplies the city. So, the next morning, the young man contacts the police and Ingvild asks Vidar for permission to enter the tunnel, since that part of the mountain belongs to Judal Industries. After being notified, the businessman transports all the barrels that were inside the warehouse to another location, and Magna once again loses all the evidence that would be used to incriminate him. That same day, Magna is expelled from school, and Ran informs the other students that he is undergoing a psychiatric evaluation. Even after the end of his relationship with Gree, Fior decides to stay close to ensure that Saxa does not try to do anything against her. While watching the girl, he sees the harm that Judal Industries has caused to Jan's health and decides to compensate him for all the harm done. In the morning, Fior visits Gree's house and gives her father a significant amount of money. His goal is to cover the insurance Jan would receive, but the man refuses all the money. Moved by her classmate's attitude, Gree decides to take a walk with him, and Fior says he is not like the other members of his family. Unlike his parents and sister, the young man does not seek power. According to him, his true desire is to become a good person, and he asks Gree for help in achieving this. After undergoing a psychiatric evaluation, Magna is diagnosed with paranoia, and the doctor prescribes 2 medications that will help him become calmer and less explosive. After dropping Gree off at home, Fior leaves, and on the way he finds Magna sitting on a bridge eating ice cream with his mother. Knowing that the young man is going through a difficult time, Fior decides to tell him the truth and says that there were 2,500 barrels hidden in the glacier. According to Fior, these barrels will be shipped that night, and although he knows it is too late to fix things, he shows willingness to cooperate with Magna. As soon as his classmate leaves, Magna runs to the port and finds the barrels being transported to a ship. That night, Fior is confronted by his own family, and Vidar accuses him of lying about his relationship with Gree. Convinced that the girl has information that could compromise them, Vidar orders Fior to prove his loyalty and get rid of her. During the Constitution Day celebration, Saxa states that if Fior does not eliminate Gree, she will do the job herself. At that moment, Vidar receives a message from Ingvild and must go to the police station to explain himself, because that morning someone left some barrels at the station's door, and they match Magna's description exactly. Taken completely by surprise, Vidar denies any involvement with the barrels, but the police officer knows he is lying and informs him that she will launch an investigation. When Saxa takes the stage to sing the national anthem, Fior asks Gree to accompany him, and when Magna sees the girl being led away, he realizes that something is wrong. He immediately goes after the couple and hears Gree's cry for help. She is visibly frightened by Fior's sudden change in behavior. Seeing the girl in danger, Magna picks up a hammer he finds along the way and throws it at the young man's head. After knocking him down, Magna approaches and begins a series of blows with the aim of finishing off his enemy. When she realizes that Magna is about to commit a crime and destroy the rest of his life, Gree decides to stop him and helps Fior get up. At that moment, Vidar appears and Magna orders them to flee, as a great fight is about to begin. Seeing a hammer flying toward him, Vidar easily dodges it and takes Magna's blows as if they were nothing. On the other hand, when the giant decides to counterattack, Magna is thrown away and a dark cloud begins to cover the sky. After taking a few blows, the young man comes to the conclusion that he is no match for his opponent, but when he hears Vidar speaking contemptuously about Isolde, Magna's fury ignites and he accesses his true power. Raising his hands, the young man draws a large lightning bolt to himself and both are struck by the electric current, which causes numerous cracks in the ground. After being struck, the warriors faint, and Venka, who was watching the duel, transforms into a bird to fly away from the battlefield, as she has just witnessed the beginning of the prophecy that will continue Ragnarok. So what did you think of this series? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more series recaps. See you next time.